Really happy to have with me here today City of Toronto Councillor Jaye Robinson. For those of you not from Toronto, you may not be familiar, but Councillor Robinson is the chair of the Toronto Transit Commission and City Councillor for Ward 15, Don Valley West. Now, I normally jump right into the content of it, but in fact, Councillor Robinson, you have such a great history. I'm going to take a little moment to introduce a bit more of your biography. Councillor Robinson previously chaired the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee with a budget of over 2.7 billion. So this is a very large portfolio, a lot of experience coming to the table. And in addition, she is an expert in economics. And before running for municipal office, Councillor Robinson was director in economic development at the City of Toronto for over 20 years. So it's a huge amount of knowledge to bring to the TTC landscape. On a personal note, I really have to applaud you, Councillor Robinson, for your past entrepreneurial approach to merging the arts and economic development in the city. I think Toronto is just a shining jewel of a city. I think it's a global hub. And a lot of that has to do with the work you did on Nuit Blanche, Summerlicious, Winterlicious, the kind of economic and art combination. I eat my way through Winterlicious, I eat my way through Summerlicious, and then I finish it off with a night of Nuit Blanche where I don't understand 90% of the art because I'm not smart enough, but I know it's good for my brain. So thank you for your hard work on those things. On the TTC side, as TTC chair, Councillor Robinson has focused on modernization and innovation. And for those of you at this conference, that means zero emissions technology and client-facing software and application tools and really ridership-facing optimization tools. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to you, Councillor Robinson, for your insight before we turn to some Q&A and some deep dive insight into the system that you're helping to lead.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for that lovely introduction. As you've heard, I'm Jaye Robinson. I'm a city councillor and the chair of the TTC. And I couldn't be more thrilled to be in this capacity. It's a complete honor to really lead the charge, particularly during these dark days of the pandemic. It's been particularly challenging, and I'll talk a little bit about that with our next slide. 16% is the number. 16%. That is what ridership has dropped to during this pandemic. It actually gives me a chill up my spine reading that number. But it's been a very challenging, is not really the word that cuts it, time for the TTC from financial position, but also just overall safety, having to shift on the spot, be more nimble, adaptable, and focus on where the demands were for ridership. That all had to be done within days. And as we had to in every corporation and level of government throughout not just the city, the province, and the country. So 16%. And as you can see on my slide, this April ridership revenue stood at about 27% of pre-pandemic levels. So it has been a challenge, and we look forward to things normalizing. And we hope for productive days ahead. We've had an amazing team at the TTC who has pushed forward and kept Toronto moving through the pandemic. And thank you. I can't thank you enough for your hard work and the dedication of our entire team. People worked around the clock, weekends, weeknights to keep things on track. Having said that, there is a shining light in this, in that we were able to move a lot of projects forward as a parallel exercise, in a sense, to the pandemic. As it stormed on, we focused on what can we get done in this time period and take advantage of. And so state of good repair, the backlog, was something that we jumped on, implementing and rolling out the ATC, automatic train control, as well as focusing on transit expansion. A lot has happened on that front. And of course, what you love most, greening our transit system, has been something we've focused on during this pandemic time. Next slide, please. Something I can't help myself, I just have to share with you. Our 100th anniversary is coming up on September 1st of this year. We are excited, 100 years old. And we won't celebrate as we might have liked to have with customers and riders and Torontonians and residents on the streets with big festivals, but we will be celebrating it with the campaign that will kickstart September 1st and roll out throughout the year. So 1921 was the year, the big year, when the TTC started, and we've never looked back. So it's an opportunity for us to reflect on the history of the organization, but also to think about the future of transit. And as vaccination rates improve across the province, we are beginning to see light at the end of the tunnel, no pun intended, but we are moving forward, and we know that the TTC will play a critical role in Toronto's rebuild and recovery from this horrific pandemic and this horrific time. And quite frankly, COVID has really taught us many lessons, and it's kept top of mind and really shone a light on the fact that that threat of climate change is closer and closer. And so we are really focusing on that and asking for a coordinated approach from all levels of government. And quite frankly, it's happening. We're getting it. So we're moving mountains. If you could go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about City Hall and what's happening there. So Transform TO is what we call our environmental plan in Toronto. It's multifaceted. It's about reducing emissions, elementary but important, and setting goals on greenhouse gases, sources, buildings, energy generation, waste, and transportation. And this has been fully supported by City Council. We declared a climate emergency in 2019 and adopted higher emissions reduction targets. And we've set a goal, reaching net zero GHG emissions by 2050. Seems like a long way off, but we are very focused on this. So today specifically, I want to focus on transportation and the number of factors contributing to Toronto's overall GHG greenhouse gas emissions. If you could move to the next slide, please. So this is a great chart, kind of tells the story of where the problems are and how we're trying to tackle them. So as you can see, gasoline is the second largest emissions source in our city, contributing 4.7 megatons of carbon dioxide emissions. So this is a problem that we're trying to address through a number of measures and initiatives that I'm going to tell you about in this short 15 minutes. I've got to watch my clock because I could talk forever. So I'm trying to pay attention. So we've got an electric vehicle, an EV strategy, and that's one way of tackling these emissions. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about City Council. And at our last meeting, literally days ago, the Toronto Atmospheric Fund asked for funding in the neighborhood of 2 million and are securing it from another source. But that's going to help us, that 2 million, roll out 300 EV chargers across the GTHA. And that's something I've been pushing for years at City Council. I also want to talk a little bit about our transportation related to the emissions and, reliable, high quality transit service. So our newer subway trains can carry up to 1,080 passengers on a single train, while streetcars and buses can carry 130 and 51 passengers respectively. So even if are looking at the non-electric buses, all of which are either hybrid or clean diesel, we're happy about. The cars taken off the road by an effective transit system results in significant emission reductions. Our 255 hybrid buses, for example, can each take the place of 70 cars. So that's important, and we're pushing for that. But what we really want is the full deal, full electric. So our hybrid electric buses, when compared with the conventional diesel, which we have moved away from, lower greenhouse gas emissions by 47% and save the TTC 6.5 million annually. So there's a fiscal upside to this as well, which is exciting. So hybrids are very reliable. And we're quite pleased with this technology. If I can move to the next slide, which I think you'll like even better, because I'm going to talk about e-buses. And this is something that's happened this term, and I'm really excited about, pumped up about this. So the TTC operates the largest fully electric bus fleet in North America, and we're only going to make that better, stronger. In March, the TTC board approved the procurement of 300 additional e-buses set for the delivery of 2025. And we will be expanding this e-bus fleet to 6 times its current size. These are boasting rights. This is something we're extremely proud of, and we're going to push. And, you know, the timelines, are they perfect? No, they're not ideal, but we're going to continue to push them, and we're going to try to beat those timelines. So our buses are the workhorses of our system. I don't have to tell you that. If you live in Toronto, they're everywhere, and they're out there all the time, delivering people to work, live, and play in our city. And it gives us flexibility, and it allows us to be adaptable. We can shift travel patterns like boom, like that in the city when we have a pandemic and we need to get frontline workers from various neighborhoods to their places of work. So we were focusing very much on that. The TTC board approved the procurement of 300 additional e-buses, as I've said, and that's set for delivery. So in 2025. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, because I could talk about that forever, but it's something we're pretty pumped about. There's Rick Leary, our CEO, and me when I actually had hair, long hair, but look forward to my next hairdresser appointment. So the next slide talks, this slide talks about our e-buses again, fully electrified, great, huge, big chunks of emissions being dealt with, 250,000 tons annually. And so this is something we're quite happy about. And this reduction is equivalent to removing about over 54,000 passenger vehicles from our streets. So again, this is all good news and a real focus for us. We're actually really trying to set ourselves apart as leaders, and people will hopefully follow. Other cities in Canada will follow our lead. So we have not been able to do this alone. We have worked with the Ontario Power Generation and Toronto Hydro. They have been incredible partners, and without them, this would be a bust. So we're very grateful to OPG and Toronto Hydro for their support and are allowing us to really roll out this green fleet. So again, this is demonstrating leadership, and we've got to keep pushing. We can never let our foot off the pedal on this. I'm going to talk a little bit about streetcars, and then I'm going to try to wrap up. It's hard for me to wrap up because these are exciting topics. But the next slide talks about our streetcars. We just did this at the TTC board a couple weeks ago, very fresh. And this is a beautiful thing when all the government levels line up, and the stars line up, the governments line up, even though they fight on other issues. When it comes to transit, we work together. So you'll see here that we've just approved 60 new streetcars to be delivered in this time period of 2023-2025. The sooner the better. And $568 million in funding from the 2 levels of government, provincial and federal. There's also a little shining star in here. A lovely little sliver of money is being also dedicated to upgrading the Hillcrest facility. And this is state of good repair work. And it's not sexy. It is boring, but it needs to happen. So governments always like to throw money at shiny things like streetcars and subway trains, but we need to upgrade our facilities. So also a big chunk of this money will be dedicated to doing just that. Most of it goes to the streetcars being built, but again, very exciting announcement. Breaking news. So it's wonderful that this is happening. And if you don't know this, our streetcar network is a vital component of our transit network. It carries up to 350,000 passengers daily, pre-pandemic, of course, not during, but 350,000 people daily ride the streetcar network in Toronto. The next slide. Okay, so this talks a little bit about the process. This will allow us, and I get excited about these things, to take buses and move them into neighborhoods where we really need them. So right now, we're using these buses to compensate for the lack of streetcars. These new streetcars will allow us to reallocate these 50 buses that currently supplement service to priority routes in our city. So again, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's exciting. And this is another way of saving money. And it's actually a double win. When the governments gave us this money, it actually was quietly for us. We're going, yes, because it's a huge win win-win for us. I'm going to just, I think I have to wrap up and move to questions, but I just want to talk a little bit about expansion. So I'll just be lightning speed through the next slide on transit expansion. So 1.86 million people commute to Toronto for work by car. In May, the federal government announced $10.7 billion in funding for transit expansion. This is in addition to the $17 billion already committed by the province to these projects. So I have to say it's a very exciting time for the City of Toronto because money is pouring in to support and enhance transit. And we need that to happen. There's not been enough money in the past, and we're continuing to have extensive pressure as our city grows, and more commuters are turning to transit as an alternative to their personal vehicles. That is good news. We need them to do that, but we need to make sure we have safe, reliable, and we need to make sure we have the capacity. So this is great for the City of Toronto, this funding that's coming our way. And we're really happy that there's this rare moment in the history of our city where the governments are lining up and working collaboratively. And again, I'll tell you, that's not always easy, but it is happening where we are getting funding coming in from all three levels, including ourselves as a municipal level, to support the City of Toronto. I want you to know in summary that CD Howe did a recent study and they estimated the value of the TTC to Toronto at $2.7 billion annually. That's a great number. I'm going to throw it around. We just got that number recently, and we don't talk enough about it. So lots of good news stories for the TTC. People love and hate the TTC, but there is a lot of great stuff happening. And I am very focused on modernization and transformation of this organization. And we are achieving that. And believe it or not, the pandemic gave us a little bit of breathing time to do that. We needed to be resilient, connected. We needed to be green. And this common cooperation amongst the orders of government, it's really been a landmark time for us in these funding announcements where we have a collective interest in pushing forward critical transit initiatives. So can't say enough about it. Rare political consensus, regardless of political parties, are recognizing the critical role that public transit is playing in our cities, and particularly now as we try to rebuild and recover from a hopefully once in a lifetime pandemic that has been crushing, quite frankly, for cities around the world. So this is a great news story. All of these initiatives I've been able to speak to you quickly today, but I do have to wrap up because I'm out of time, and I do thank you for this opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Councillor Robinson. We're going to jump right into questions because you're right, there's quite a lot. But I will say to you, I just think Toronto is a gem of a city. It's not just a Canadian city, it is a global city. And I think it is one of the great cities of the 21st century that people will look back on 200 years from now and say that is a place where humanity comes to do great things. And the transit system is part of that network. And I can tell you way back when I was a poor student in Paris, and I lived in a very, very small, poor little room with a lot of mice as my friends. The one highlight of my day was walking out, apart from my studies, walking out and seeing Paris was building La Périphérique, which was this circle around Paris that had these beautiful streetcars, and you could walk on them, walk up. They were so modern. And I remember coming back at Christmas that year, and we still had beautifully old streetcars in Toronto where you still had the steps up, right? And I remember in this city, we got to get not just like Paris, we got to get global. And with your leadership and the TTC's leadership, it's happening. So let's jump right into that question, which is we've faced this pandemic. It has been cataclysmic, but there will be other pandemics. There will be climate events. There will be disasters, maybe terrorist events. It is a globalized world we're going to live in. And so we can envision that there'll be other drop-offs in ridership potentially happening. If you think forward for the next year, what concerns you most about the outlook for Toronto and the TTC over the next year? And what excites you most if vaccinations take hold and we return to some semblance or modicum of normality?
Okay, that's a great question. Thank you for it. And even though we have been seeing a lot of good news about the COVID-19 cases, and, I'm also a city councillor, so I'm involved in the rollout and the trends and the vaccinations. Toronto, as I said earlier, it hit this 20%. It's good news. Like Toronto hit the 20% fully vaccinated earlier this week. When I say vaccinated, fully vaccinated, a lot of people got the single dose, but you need two to make it happen. So that's all good news. And we're hearing more heartwarming stories on the news about the challenges of the pandemic being slowly behind us, but we all know it's not behind us. And there's going to be a ripple effect from this pandemic. We all know it. I think we've got some challenging days ahead. So in the month of April, we saw ridership at about 27% of pre-pandemic levels. This is largely attributed to the stay-at-home orders, which began on April 8th. And we still have some work to do to get back to normal. But the TTC has been pushing a number of exciting initiatives. We are hoping to welcome our riders back to an improved system, an improved experience. So we actually can't say too much, but we have a whole campaign to get people riding again. Summerlicious and Winterlicious, you mentioned off the top. I started those, you're not going to believe but I started those because of SARS. That was part of our recovery strategy to get people back into restaurants. Mel Lostman was the mayor at the time. He came to me and said, Jaye, what are we going to do? People aren't eating out. So Summerlicious and Winterlicious were outcomes and part of the recovery plan for SARS. Now, SARS was nowhere near, not even on par with this incredible pandemic, COVID-19, incredible in a bad way. But we are rolling out safety protocols like never before at the TTC. State of good repair. We have really focused on that, getting that work completed. So when riders come back, the ride will be safe, reliable, and welcoming. And we are going to have this incredible campaign. I can't say too much about it, but welcoming people back to the system, whether they go by, they travel by bus, streetcar, or the train. Also, for a lot of people, this is important, Wi-Fi. We are slowly but surely, and it should have happened years ago, as should have being able to tap with your MasterCard or Visa. Don't get me started on that topic because that's related to Presto. So we're not going down that path. But Wi-Fi on select bus routes is being rolled out as we speak. And so the future expansions of that will be rolling out as COVID's rolling away. So I think just really getting that work done on the ATC, which we've been very aggressive in closing down, using these closures to get the asbestos out of the system and ATC into the system. So it's a frightening time to be the chair of the TTC, but we've also used it to our advantage. And we are going to be making sure people feel comfortable and safe, that the service is reliable, and that people enjoy their experience on the system and feel like they belong there again after this very rough time for our city.
For sure. And Councillor, that segues nicely to the next question. First thing I would say, though, is shout out to Toronto Public Health. I mean, for everything we've all been worried about, there's a lot of uncertainty, but I got my shot downtown, convention center, beautiful, streamlined.
Right.
It really made you walk away thinking like, yeah, I'm happy I pay taxes because that took care of me when I needed it, right? So great on Toronto Public Health. I'd also say, oh my goodness, I spend so much money during Winterlicious and Summerlicious. So you did the right thing. Having said that, SARS was scary, for those folks in Toronto. It was really scary. People were dropping dead and nobody really knew if there was a lifespan to this. So bravo on the economic recovery. And the question I want to ask you is, looking forward, you alluded to TTC leading on the zero emissions bus landscape. And you've just alluded to connectivity on buses, which is totally overdue. The idea that I have Wi-Fi anywhere, anytime to be productive, totally overdue. Where else do you see steps being taken by the City of Toronto and TTC to be national leaders, specifically in green transit, but also in client-facing technology to make transit swank and cool and the place you want to go? Okay,
well, that's a big order. Swank and cool? We'll try, but that's a tall order. Right now, we're kind of trying to survive, but also have this parallel track of getting things done. So great, another great question. Thank you. And we're trying to be national leaders. I mean, you and I chatted about this prior to today's discussion. And we are really trying to be leaders because, as you said, when you lead, people follow. And we need to take that role because we are the biggest system in Canada and will always probably be so. I certainly hope so. If we're not, we're in trouble. So the TTC is employing a strategy to work towards a zero emission bus fleet, as I've talked about. And we've been running our hybrid buses for many years. People don't really realize that, but we found them to be so effective and reliable. And each hybrid bus at capacity takes the place of 70 cars. So we are no longer buying or purchasing diesel buses. No way. Never again is that going to happen, certainly under my watch, and I hope anybody who follows me. That's done. And now we're focusing on hybrid electric, but that's only for the next couple of years. Then we're going all electric, basically from 2023, 2024 on. So we're really maybe 2024, but as soon as we can, we're going all electric. We've already purchased a number. We've already had 2 press conferences announcing our e-buses, fully e-buses, and we do have the largest e-bus fleet in North America. That is something to hang our hats on. So that's a big focus for us. You know, I talked a little bit about the city of Toronto and what they're doing and how we're kind of collaborating and playing off each other. We have very impressive green building standards for all our facilities at the TTC, and I want to tell you a little bit about it. We just recently reopened the Nickel Bus Garage. It was just announced again. This is all timely. Couple months ago, and it's got the largest green roof in all of Toronto. It also comes equipped with solar panels and high capacity stormwater retention system. So it's capable of holding a volume of an Olympic-sized pool. So not only are we upgrading our facilities, while we're doing it, we're making them environmentally friendly, and we're helping the whole city by doing this. And you know, cool is the word of the day. You brought it up, but cool roofs and green roofs are standard across many of our facilities. A lot of people don't know this, so I'm really happy you're giving me the opportunity to share this. And that lowers our electricity demands by protecting, you know, by protecting from heat. So it's really awesome what's happening and exciting. We've got to do a better job of telling our story, but this is not just about the tracks and the streetcars and the buses. This is also about our facilities. And as you know, we have massive facilities across our city. So these things are happening. We're committed to it. It's baked into policy, and we will not stray from this. We will continue to forge ahead.
You know, Councillor Robinson, you've stated something that we think is truthful, and I've said it before. Cities are going to lead the action on climate. And it's true, we often wait around for federal commitments and Paris climate targets and very multinational kind of abstract commitments. But cities are the working horse of climate action. And I think you've proven that out here. I do want to go a little bit deeper into the swankness of all the greenery. And truly believe we have to get to the day where, like, a woman or a man or a transgender person putting on their dating app that they take transit and don't own a car is like the sexiest thing you could imagine, right? I think like we have to get there, and then that is transformational change. But in the green space, if we could take 2 more minutes of your time on hydrogen. So we had a chance to do some analytic work with TTC as one of our members. It is true, there's some long deadheading, sometimes some very long, arduous routes, lots of crush capacity for ridership, not a lot of downtime. And in those physical environments, sometimes battery electrification alone can't cut it. And sometimes you do need hydrogen electrification. So what is the future you foresee for hydrogen in the TTC?
Okay, so thank you for asking that question. It's kind of out there. It's there's not I can't really give you a solid answer on this, just except to say that it's on our radar. Without a doubt, it's on our radar. Are they on the street now? They're not on the street now. So you know, clearly that's at an earlier stage than electric, and that's been our focus. And I've been pushing that, but it's not that we're dismissing it, because we know it's the future, but we're just not there yet on incorporating that into our fleet. We are studying it. We just don't know how it will play out on the street. I've heard a rumor that other cities, maybe BC has done it. I'm not sure. But we're not there yet, and so we have to pull up our pants on this and get moving, because this is something we need to really embrace down the road. But it's just, I think right now we're a bit tentative about how it will really, live on the street, how will it unfold? So that's not something we're actively pursuing, but we are looking at options. And the technology is very promising. So I think it's going to be our next phase. Our next step is looking at innovative transit solutions and looking at the fleet over the next 20 years and how we gravitate to that. So a great question. We're not there yet, but I'll commit, because of this conversation, to start pushing that agenda harder.
And we commit to having you back at our conference next year so we can hear about it. And, we're leading a project with Mississauga right now on hydrogen fuel cell buses. So we have talked to our colleagues at TTC about a joint arrangement of some sort in the future, at least some lessons learned. So happy to keep working with you on that. Now, I know we've come to the end of our time. I'm going to ask you, Councillor, for one last question in the final moments. What does the next decade look like for autonomous transit vehicles? Because TTC is leading an AV shuttle project. It's exciting. What do you think it looks like in your city?
So again, a victim of COVID, because it has been delayed. I'm glad you asked me about this, because this is something I'm passionate about. Last term, I was the chair of transportation. And so I moved a number of motions on this. And what that looked like is, the creation of a autonomous vehicle tactical plan for the city. So I was pushing that. I moved that in, last term, 2018. As the chair of transportation and infrastructure and environment, all were bundled into there. So, the TTC had originally planned to run this automated shuttle trial in the spring. Unfortunately, good old COVID pressures related to the pandemic have pushed it to the fall. But we are proceeding, and it will run in the West Rouge neighborhood in Scarborough. And we are testing this out, this shuttle, which seats 8 people and runs with 0 emissions. Now, there will be a human attendant on board at all times. And this trial is the first of its kind in Toronto. So again, we're a bit proud about this. Although it's been delayed, we are proceeding. And it will be the first in Canada that is run in partnership with the transit agency, with the purpose of assessing potential within the transit system. So there's no, it's a pilot, and that's how Toronto loves to do things. Everything starts with a pilot. But I also find when we do roll out a pilot, it often sticks. So I do hope that this is something that will fill in the gaps in our existing system. And this potential is huge. But, again, a lot of people are tentative on this topic. I am not. I have been pushing it for 2 terms now at City Council, at City Hall, and I will continue to do that. So I'm glad you finished with that futuresque question.
Well, and Councillor Robinson, I have to say, we've learned a lot from the TTC project. Your team's been great in sharing information with us, and we're trying to mimic it now in York Region. So to your point about we start with a pilot and it becomes true. I live and work on King Street. I was a believer in the King Street pilot. It is now true. It's wonderful. It's lovely. It should be expanded. So these are all the great things. And with your leadership, I truly foresee Toronto becoming that gem of a global city. We appreciate your time, Councillor Robinson. We know you're pressed for it, but your insights have been fabulous. And I commit to hopefully having the next session with you on the shuttle next year while we do it live from that AV shuttle in West Rouge. So thank you for your time, Councillor, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was an absolute pleasure.